Hello everybody, welcome back to our YouTube channel. I'm Sara from Balkan Hotspot, and today with us we have a special guest, Gianni Rufini, the Director General of Amnesty International Italy. Welcome Gianni, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Very nice to meet you all online.
Thank you, it's a pleasure to have you with us. So, last week, it was the 10th of December, it was the World Human Rights Day. And we couldn't celebrate it the way we would wanted to because of some technical issues, but today we are back with this interview, and also we have to mention that every day should be World Human Rights Day, right? And I think it's especially important for you and Amnesty International.
Yes, it should be a Human Rights Day. Unfortunately, this is not the name of the game, in a sense that at the same time as we celebrate the big achievement made in the last 70 years, we have to complain about what is going on right now for the execution of people condemned to death, for the torture still practiced in many countries, for the recurrent violations of human rights happening in many places. It's a never-ending story, I would say. We made enormous progress, but there is still a lot to do.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. So I think to start, I hope this interview can be a wonderful opportunity for us and our followers also to learn something about human rights directly from an expert. So I would like you to help us to go back to basics in a way and explain us briefly what human rights are, where they come from, who is entitled to human rights, and who should protect and promote human rights.
Well, essentially human rights are, in an informal way, are just the fundamental rights that every individual have to enjoy to live a healthy and happy and free life. These should be the rights that states should guarantee to all individuals amongst their citizens, which is not exactly what happens today, and certainly it was not what was happening at the time when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was written and signed. In a formal way, human rights are those rights that are written into that Universal Declaration. Take the time to search for it on the internet, look at the different articles, and you will find out that everything you might wish in terms of personal freedom, freedom of choice, freedom of expression, freedom of ideas are there, are written there, and are a commitment that all the signatories of that Universal Declaration undertook as their duty, their obligation towards their citizens. It was a declaration written by states to reflect what the citizens' rights should be. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, in the experience of those who, like me, have fought for human rights all their lives, the biggest enemies of human rights are exactly the same states, the same governments that should implement them in society. So they have an obligation to ensure rights, and at the same time they are fighting often against those rights. This is a contradiction that comes from the exercise of power.
Yeah.
The idea that if I want to have a power, I have inevitably to repress some people's rights, to limit people's rights. The people's rights are sort of getting in the way in which, as states, they govern the world. They are an obstacle. They are an extra difficulty. They do not allow power to express itself in the full form, because this is their function. Their function is to put stakes to put limits to exercise of power, to put limits that ensure that citizens can express themselves, can vote for their government, can express their ideas, can defend their fundamental rights. And this is not always appreciated by government forces. We have to say, even in democratic countries, it is not something that only happens in non-democratic countries. It also happens in democratic countries.
Yeah, that's our next question. Yeah.
This is why we are all still involved and fighting for human rights in every country, because no state has fulfilled its obligations entirely.
Yeah, because I think most of the times people that live in Western countries, let's say, are like convinced that violation of human rights only happens in so-called developing countries that are also considered less democratic or even not democratic as Western countries. And I think that this can lead to a misconception about violation of human rights, because also here in Europe or in general in Western countries, violation of human rights is a thing, it's happening. And we don't even like realize it sometimes.
We did not even realize it. Yeah, the point is exactly that, for two reasons. One is that, okay, human rights are expanding in a way, in a sense that there are new rights emerging in our lives. Today, many people consider internet a human right in itself, access to internet, because this means access to information, access to knowledge, access to freedom of expression. Yeah. It's a big thing. And we are discussing whether we should include the internet amongst the basic human rights. Mm-hmm. For decades, nobody thought that a marriage between two persons of the same sex, of the same gender, would be acceptable. Now it is in many countries. It is still something that we have to conquer in other countries. It is something that is still dramatically repressed in certain countries. But now we are all fighting for that, because we all believe that two people of the same sex should be able to get married if they want to. And so, you know, they are expanding themselves. In the evolution of society, in the evolution of culture, there is the acquisition of new rights, of new views of life that imply the existence of new rights. And we have to convince states to transform these views, these ideas, in laws, in pieces of paper that actually allow citizens to do certain things. This is not easy. This is not easy. All states are very conservative normally in this sense. They are very reluctant to open new areas, new freedoms, new spaces to the citizens. On one hand, because they don't know how to manage all that. On the other hand, because they are scared by this increased freedom of the citizens, which is seen by government forces as a reduction of their own power. If the citizen is more free, I will have less power. This is the idea, and this is the misconception that we have to fight against. Mm-hmm. And we have to convince governments that it is only through the full realization of all citizens' rights that a democracy becomes really strong, that a society becomes really strong and can offer possibility to people to reach their happiness, the fulfillment of their needs and their views. So it is not an easy matter. Certainly in Western countries, to define them with a generic term, even in democratic countries, we have seen in the last years and decades an increasing use of laws, for instance, anti-terror laws, as a means for repression. The laws on immigration are increasingly repressive laws. Many of the laws on civil freedom are being under discussion now in some countries. Even freedom of expression, even freedom of association in certain countries. So we have cases in Europe, let me mention Hungary and Poland and Belarus, where we have situations that are very close to proper dictatorships, where there are laws repressing freedom of association, laws repressing freedom of press, freedom of information, along with laws against migrants, against asylum for refugees. These are all laws that tend to repress human rights, that tend to limit the capacity of civil society to fight for human rights. And this is happening in the heart of Europe, yeah, which is, anyway, the continent where human rights were most implemented, were most transformed into a reality. If we look at other continents, of course, the situation is much worse. So, yes, there is a problem also in most developed countries. And the fight for human rights, for this reason, will never end, probably.
Yeah, and of course, like the role of organization like Amnesty International is fundamental in order to raise awareness of like and promoting human rights and denouncing the violation of human rights. And also we can contribute as individuals to the everyday promotion of human rights. But do you think that we made, what kind of progress did we made, like in order to reduce those violations you were talking about?
Well, honestly, over the decades, there were huge progresses. Let's take one example, which is particularly important for my organization, death penalty.
Yeah.
When we started advocating against the death penalty, there were in the world 160 countries that had death penalty in their laws and that used the penalty normally. Mm-hmm. There are no more than 20 countries doing that. The other 140 have given up, have renounced to that, either formally by deleting the law, mm-hmm, in some cases informally, in the sense that the law is still there, but they do not execute people. There are people condemned to death, but the execution will never occur. Why this second scenario? Because, of course, unfortunately, the majority of public opinion is still in favor of death penalty. The cultural change was not so complete as we hoped it would be. And there are still in the minds of most people the idea that at least in certain cases, that penalty would be justified. So some states are reluctant to delete it from their laws. Mm-hmm. This would not be completely accepted or well accepted by part of the public opinion. So they keep it in their laws, but they don't do executions, which is the most important thing for us. Anyway, 140 countries less. There is just a bunch of countries that are still resisting, and every year their number reduces. We had 2 days ago, we had the new vote in the General Assembly of the United Nations. Every 2 years there is a vote on death penalty, mm-hmm, abolition of death penalty, and every 2 years there are 2 or 3 more states that renounce death penalty. This has happened the other day as well. So it's a continuous progress. It is slow.
Yeah.
We have done doing this for 60 years now. So, but we will win someday. Of course, not all battles are so difficult and so lengthy. Luckily, we can make success in many cases with a much shorter battle and with less effort. I mean, we consider every year we are able to liberate around 1,000 prisoners of conscience from the jails. Every year, every day, 2, 3 prisoners of conscience are released in the world somewhere under the pressure of our action and the action of many other organizations working on human rights that want those people liberated. This happens in repressive regimes where those people of conscience are those who are put in a jail because they have different ideas, because they express different views from the government, because they protested against acts of that government, and are put into jail for this reason. This happens extensively in some countries. Very close to us in Europe, we have this situation in Egypt, we have this situation in Turkey, just to mention 2 cases. And there are many more countries still repressing freedom of thought. But those people have to be liberated, and we, through our campaigning, we succeed to liberate those people, 1,000 every year. It is not enough, of course, when there are thousands still in jail, but we achieve something. We make a progress. Every year, many states change their laws in order to implement new human rights. The area of human rights is expanding all over the world. And this is under the action of civil society organizations that are doing this. My organization has been the first big international human rights organization in the world. It was established in 1961. We are about to celebrate our 60th anniversary next year, which is fine. And certainly I'm happy that we are so strong and so important. But I strongly believe that any organization, any association working on human rights is important to this battle, is fundamental to this battle. We don't have to make differences. We don't have to divide between good and bad associations or whatever. We are all part of the same force for human freedom, and we have to fight together. Certainly, after the signature of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, if there were not organizations like mine that fought to promote, educate, inform people on human rights, to fight against states violating human rights, to raising the issue and the flag of human rights every day, there wouldn't be human rights in the world. Because the same states that signed that declaration, that implied also the Article 1 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights is all human beings are born equal in rights and dignity, and report to each other in a spirit of brotherhood. That means equality and brotherhood. These are the 2 pillars of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But those same states that signed the declaration a few years after 1948 resumed fighting wars, resumed repressing rights in their own country, and so on and so forth. So if it was not for organizations like mine, there wouldn't be human rights in the world. There wouldn't be awareness of rights in the citizens of the world. There wouldn't be such a culture of human rights that pervades a large part of our cultures. not only the Western cultures, but also the cultures of many other areas of the world. Now, human rights are a concept. Everyone knows that human rights exist. Everyone agrees that human rights are important. And this is happened after 1948 because there was a strong civil society fighting for those rights. And now they are part of our lives.
Yeah, and I feel like the cultural, let's say, you mentioned before that probably changing the laws, it's so much easier than changing the mind of people that support those ideas. So it's a never-ending process. It's a very long process in order to make people change their mind about human rights and human rights issues. That's for sure. I totally agree about that. So finally, I would like to address the current situation we are living in Europe, because I think we are facing many human rights crises, starting from COVID-19, for example. What are your thoughts on that?
COVID-19 had the merit of highlighting what remains one of the most serious limitations to a full blooming of human rights, which is inequality.
Mm-hmm.
In the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there was inherent the idea that if all human beings are born equal, this equality should be reflected in some way also in the economic life. All people should have enough food, enough money, enough well-being to enjoy a healthy and long life. This is not what happens in the world. Nowadays, we still have almost 1 billion people malnourished in this planet. We have, I mean, we talk about COVID, and we are making calculations of how many intensive care units we have in many places, in many countries, and nowadays, when we are still building in our own countries new intensive care units and so on and so forth, if you look at the situation in Uganda, yeah, there are 8 beds for the intensive care unit. And this is a good example because in other African countries, there are no intensive care units bed. Now, I mean, this means that this inequality has a dramatic impact on the lives of everybody in the world. This means that as long as there will be this disproportion, this massive disproportion in the availability of well-being for people, there cannot be a complete peace, there cannot be a good balance in the world. I mean, we have in the world today, we have 62 people, 62 guys, 62 people who own half of the wealth of the entire planet. Now, with such disproportions, it is impossible to realize that level of equality, or minimum equality, that is a foundation for human rights for all. Now, this is the problem we have to solve now. To say stop to this increasing inequality. We have to make sure that the wealth in the world is redistributed equally and fairly across the countries. We do not have, we must not have people dying by starvation in this planet in the 21st century. And we shouldn't have so many wars, an increasing number of wars, an increasing number of victims of wars, so people killed by wars every day. Now, it's time to put an end to all this. And certainly we have to start by redistributing the wealth of this planet in a more equal manner, in order to ensure that every individual achieves a full life with dignity. Nobody has to fight to eat the food he or she needs, to fight to achieve the right to express his or her opinion. I mean, we need to have a decent standard of human rights and equality for everybody. This is what will lead to the peace, will lead to the stability, will lead possibly also to the resolution of the climate change problem. This will lead to a full expression of human beings in all their potential of life, of ideas, of production of culture, of production of system, of production of love over the world. If we accept fully the idea that we are all equal, there would be no reason for war, no reason for hostility, no reason for xenophobia, no reason for racism. So it's a matter of education, it's a matter of information, surely, but we need to have this as a priority for everybody. And as citizens, we need to fight for that. That's, I mean, nobody's going to make you a gift of human rights. If you want your rights, you have to fight for them.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we could go on for hours talking about human rights and all these issues, because as you were speaking, in my mind I was having so many questions and I wanted to ask you, but I think that I don't want to steal more time, because I know that you have lots of things to do. So I would like to thank you again for this inspiring chat. It was wonderful and very educational also for me and for all those who follow us. So I hope we will have the pleasure to have you again with us here on Balkan Hotspot. And of course,
whenever you I'd be happy to.
Yeah, for those who follow us, of course, if you are interested in human rights, and don't forget to follow what Amnesty International does and all their initiatives on social media, or contact the organization if you want to support in a way. Of course, we can encourage you to do it. And also don't forget to continue to follow us here on Balkan Hotspot for more content. And thank you so much, Gianni. Again, it was a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much again. Happy New Year to everybody.
Yeah, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Yeah, thank you very much, Gianni.
Thank you. Ciao.
Bye.